Hello SBI4U. This is the third video. It's number 3.3, and here we're talking about metabolisms. We're going through about half of this note here. So what we're going to cover is parts 1, 2, and 3 in this note. So I'll put that up as learning goals. We're going to learn about the basal metabolic rate. That's what BMR stands for. We're going to talk about overeating and fast and slow metabolisms. We'll talk about the metabolic processing of fats and proteins, including what the heck the keto diet is. So let's put those away and jump into our first topic. There's our first topic. And that is the basal metabolic rate and the total daily energy expenditure and the difference between the two. We'll jump back to this diagram when we talk about the processing of fats and proteins, but it's a very good diagram to keep in mind, so we'll jump back to that. Okay, so let's talk about the basal metabolic rate and the total daily energy expenditure. The basal metabolic rate, BMR, you'll hear me say BMR a lot. The basal metabolic rate is how much energy your body uses while at rest. What we mean by at rest is literally like in a coma. Right, so keep in mind here, unless you're in a coma, you're always using more energy than your basal metabolic rate. As soon as you're, even awake, as soon as you're even just lying in bed, you're already using more than your basal metabolic rate. So basal is absolutely the most basic thing needed to keep you alive, to keep, your heart pumping, your lungs breathing, to keep repairing things that need repairing, stuff like that. All of those human body functions, nothing to do with like thinking or moving or anything like that. Really basic, the most basic possible stuff to keep you alive. So that's basic basal metabolic rate. And the other thing here, TDEE, is the total daily energy expenditure. TDEE is your basal metabolic rate plus any activities that you do during the day. So, literally any activities. Getting out of bed counts as an activity in the total daily energy expenditure. Talking counts as an activity. Plus the digestion, because it takes energy to break up the food that we eat. Here's a kind of a chart, it's a simple chart to show you the breakdown. About 70% of the energy that you use in a day is just for those cell processes, just the basal metabolic rate. So your heart beating, your lungs breathing, repairing your skin cells, making new blood cells, that kind of stuff. The invisible kind of part of your metabolism. And then the other 30% is any kind of physical activity, and once again, literally everything counts as physical activity for this. And then 10% of it is the thermic effect of food, which is what I was talking about earlier, is the amount of energy that it takes to break up the food that we eat. There are equations for the basal metabolic rate. They've been created as an average from studies of people. What they do is basically they encase the person in wax, and then they measure how hot the wax gets, and then that's how they figure out how much heat the person is putting off. Remember from thermodynamics that anything that's wasted is heat. This is one of the equations. It gives you an answer in calories per day. So the same kind of, so down here, calories per day. The same kind of calories that you'll see on food packaging. So you can work this out. I did it for myself once. Mine is about 1,200. So 1,200 calories per day is my metabolic rate, and that's 70% of my normal day, right? That's 70%. So really I should be eating something like 1,600 calories a day. At my age, my height, and my weight. And you could use this calculation for yourself as well if you wanted to. There's also a short method, 1 kilocalorie per kilogram per hour times 24 hours, or 24 kilocalories per kilogram. So I'm gonna sneak into the short method here, and you'll see that it pulls up about the same for me. Calculator, it's 24 times my mass in kilograms, 75. So for me, that comes up with 1,800. So 1,800 kilocalories a day for me. That's the short method. That includes basic physical activity and thermic effective food, the short method. Yeah, so that's BMR. It is, once again, it's an average. So it depends on your sex, your height, your age, and your weight. Why? Well, remember that BMR is the basic and energy requirements for your cells to just do cell stuff. So if you have more cells, aka more weight, those cells are going to use more energy. So people with more mass will actually use more energy just as a baseline. Also depends on age. The younger you are, notice that age increases it. The minus the age. So minus the age, meaning so age will actually make it go down. Because as you get older, your metabolism slows down. But not by a lot, right? It's 6.8 calories a year. So every 10 years you have to eat 68 fewer calories, basically. Height, age, and height, same thing, right? More cells means more energy used. Also, more height means your heart has to work harder to push the blood up to your head. So being taller also increases it. And biological sex is basically also based on the number of cells. Men tend to have more muscle cells than women, and muscle cells burn more energy than fat cells do. So so that's why sex matters. Yeah, so we talked about TDEE. TDEE also includes digestion and activities. So here's the digestion part. When we eat fat or carbs, so any kind of fat or carbs, including starches and stuff, about 10% of the energy in the fat or the carb goes into just digesting the fat or the carb. So like if I eat an Oreo cookie and it's got about 100 calories, I'm actually only getting 90 calories out of it because 10% of those calories are used just breaking up the fat or the carb. But protein, it's actually much higher. It's 25% of the calories in a protein are used breaking up the protein because they go through a lot of processing. And this is why people say that protein fills you up more for the same number of calories, because it takes your body time to break up the protein. Yeah, so that's the thermic effect of food is what we call it. That's that green slice, right? About 10% of a normal diet. If you're eating a lot of protein, it's going to be more than 10% because protein takes a lot of energy to process. And then this is, for example, the calories burned per hour of various activities doing during the day. So if you're, for example, running, if you run for a whole hour, you're going to burn about 563 calories. If you're cycling for an hour, slowly, 280 calories. If you're swimming, 402, and even just walking burns 141 calories an hour. As a reference, 1 can of Coke is like 160 calories. So, you have to walk for an hour and a bit to get the, to use the same amount of energy that's in 1 can of Coca-Cola. So, that's one of these things about making lifestyle choices. You can either move more or you can eat less. Both make a difference in your total energy balance for the day. And then just some basic thermodynamics. If you're using more energy than you're taking in, you have to get that energy from somewhere. You can't just create energy out of nowhere. It's got to come from your own energy stores. So from your fat, and from your glycogen. So yeah, if you burn more calories than you eat, your body starts using its energy stores. And the two obvious ways to do that is either to do more activities to burn more calories, or to take in fewer calories. And it's generally easier to take in fewer calories than it is to do more activity. Of course, doing more activities has, other biological benefits like getting stronger and mental health stuff. And so, you got to find that balance. And then on this side, if you eat more calories than you burn, your body is always trying to get ready for any kind of lack of food. It wants to have some energy stores in case there's times when you're not going to eat as much as you use. So if you end up eating more calories than you burn, that gets stored in glycogen. And then once your glycogen stores are good, your liver starts turning it into fat. Both of these things happen in the liver. So when your liver is good on glycogen, it goes, okay, I'm going to store that as fat now. Okay, so that's basal metabolic rate and total daily energy expenditure. What's important here is the difference between the two, right? And the kind of things that affect both BMR and total daily energy expenditure. Next up in our learning goals are fast and slow metabolisms. So we're going to actually talk about different things that can affect the metabolism. So fast and slow metabolisms. Fast and slow metabolisms. Right, and our keep in mind is going to be humans vary considerably. Can metabolisms be faster and slower than others, and how? And this is kind of an interesting chart about men versus women. So women are always on the left here, and men are on the right. And this one here tracks kilocalories per day on average, the resting energy. So that's not basal metabolic rate, that's total daily energy expenditure, TDEE, if you're just having a normal day, right? If you're just kind of sitting around, lying in bed, that kind of thing. This assumes absolutely no extra exercise. So the main difference is, of course, men are just bigger on average than women, more kilograms on average than women. This tracks all the different organs, right? So muscle, for example, you can really see that difference in muscle between men and women. That makes most of the difference. We can see that the fat content stays pretty much the same between men and women. Women have a little bit more fat than men on average. And because they're shorter on average, that means that the percentage is higher. Percentage of fat is higher for women. But they need that for various purposes. And residual is all the other stuff. So that's actually this. So residual is the other big part of it. And that's stuff like skin. There's a lot of kind of connective tissue and skin to deal with. And all these little guys in here, these little guys, are the heart, the kidneys, the liver, and the brain. So they don't actually take up that much. They don't take up that much mass, right? They're like a couple of kilos, right? A couple of, maybe 10 pounds, something like that. That's all of these guys together, right? All of our big organs. But then when we jump over to the energy used in a day by these things, we can see it's pretty much backwards. These guys that take up such a small proportion of our of our mass use most of the energy. Right, they use most of our daily energies. Those organs, and the one that uses the most might surprise you. A lot of people think maybe the brain uses the most energy in the body, or maybe the heart uses the most energy in the body because it's always pumping blood just constantly. But the heart is actually quite low on energy expenditure. 53 calories, 93 calories. The kidneys use, twice as much energy as the heart. Kidneys use twice as much energy as the heart. The liver uses the most energy. The liver is the most energetically intensive organ. And it kind of makes sense when you think about what the liver does. It is constantly checking the blood and pulling things out of the blood and putting things back into the blood. It's always monitoring that and doing things with it. So the liver is number one, and then number two is the brain. Number two is the brain. The brain is using more energy. Is using the second most energy. And you can even see a big jump here. The male liver, because men have more blood and more muscle and more fat, and a little bit less fat, but just more stuff in general, because they have more stuff circulating, their liver uses a lot more energy, so 140 more calories just from the liver. And male brains actually use more energy than female brains too. By about 40 calories a day. That doesn't mean that men are smarter than women, it just means that their brains are bigger. Bigger doesn't necessarily mean smarter, it just means there's more cells. There's a lot of support cells in the brain too. That makes an energy difference. Generally speaking, men use more energy than women in all of their body tissues, and that's why men have a higher metabolism than women. So that's men versus women. There's also individual differences within the men and the women group. So this is a chart that tracks different basal metabolic rates of women and different basal metabolic rates of men. So this is 381 different women. And down here you see their weight in kilograms. And over here you see their calories per day, their basal metabolic rate. And you can see here, for example, that this woman here, her right there, she's got a mass of 62 kilograms about. It's a little bit past 60, and her daily metabolic rate, her basal metabolic rate, is 1,000 calories per day. So if she just has a lazy day and eats more than 1,000 calories, she'll start gaining weight. But this woman here, this one here, that little dot right there, is basically the same mass. She's a little bit heavier, maybe a pound more, but she's burning 1,700 calories a day, 1,750 calories a day. Within the same weight, you can have vastly different metabolisms. So metabolisms can actually be fast and slow between people, and you can see that in this spread. Now you can also have, for example, two people that are different masses, but have the same metabolic rate. So this woman is 45 kilograms, or about 100 pounds, and this woman's about 220 pounds, and they have the same, about 1,300 calories a day basal metabolic rate. We see the same thing for men, right? You have this guy and this guy that are over 100 pounds difference in mass, but the same metabolic rate, and this guy and this guy that are the same mass, but they have vastly different metabolic rates. This one's 1,500, this one's 2,500, so almost double. What accounts for these crazy differences is basically the organs. Different amounts of organ function will make for different basal metabolic rates, different resting metabolic rates. And another thing that surprisingly makes a big difference is being fidgety, not being able to sit still and always playing with something. That actually does burn a fair amount of energy during the day. So a lot of studies point to that as one of the main culprits. The rest of it's kind of genetics of how efficient your organs are. The more efficient your organs are, the lower your basal metabolic rate is going to be. You're going to use less energy if your organs are more efficient. If you have certain organ diseases, maybe your kidneys don't work very well, they're going to have to work harder to do the same work as normal kidneys, so they'll be using more energy. Or maybe you have some liver problems, Sometimes that'll make your liver work harder. Sometimes it'll make your liver work less hard. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff. But most of the difference is on muscle. So as it says here, muscle burns more energy than fat, and it accounts for most of the difference. So most of the difference is really on how much muscle versus fat someone has, but it doesn't explain all of it. So someone that's really lean and has a lot of muscle will have the same mass, but will have a much higher basal metabolic rate. So this person might just be really muscly, and this person might just be the same weight, but it's mostly fat more than muscle, kind of thing. So that's the difference. That's some of the things that affect different metabolisms. Let's jump back to learning goals. We've talked about fast and slow metabolisms and how this can contribute to overeating. So overeating, you have to eat. If you eat more than your total daily energy expenditure, you're going to gain weight. But as you see here, those formulas on the previous page, these formulas are not the end-all and be-all of basal metabolic rate, because if these formulas were 100% accurate, this would be a much tighter spread. It would only be based on age. Yeah. Last thing is metabolic processing of fats and proteins. So let's change that over. Metabolic processing of fats and proteins. Most of these. Alright, so changing our keep in mind to nitrogen is not part of the mitochondrial pathways. Everything there is a carbon molecule. Well, it's not processed. We'll say processed. Not processed in the mitochondrial pathways. And our current topic is the metabolic processing of fats and proteins. So let's jump into that. And I'm actually going to jump back for a second to this diagram here. You can see the food intake, and you can see the three different classes of biomolecules that we've talked about. We'll briefly cover nucleic acids as well. So there's proteins, complex carbs, and fats. Complex carbs get stored as glycogen in the liver and then brought back out. Triglycerides are your fats. The complex carbs eventually will get transformed into glucose. The glucose goes into our all of the stuff that we've learned, right? The cytoplasm will turn the glucose into pyruvate. The pyruvate goes on the mitochondria, and it makes ATP. But the other ones can feed into this as well, but they're not going to go through glycolysis, because that specific step is for glucose. So they're going to jump right into either pyruvate oxidation or right into the Krebs cycle. And that's what we're talking about here. So proteins get turned into basic amino acids, triglycerides get turned into smaller carbon molecules, and they also get thrown into the mix. So that's what we're talking about here. If you have more fat than you need, it'll get stored. If you have less fat than you need, it'll come out and get used for energy. So that's how people want to lose fat. They want to try to force their body to use it for energy production instead of glucose. Glucose is your number one, and then fats are your number two. So here we go. So if this is all down to the liver, if the liver is low on glycogen, it starts processing fat as energy. starts processing fat for energy, and this is actually the process by which it does it. It's called beta oxidation. It happens in the liver cells. And what it's doing here, it's a cycle, kind of Krebs cycle-y, except for it's like the reverse of the Krebs cycle. You see here that acetyl-CoA leaves the cycle instead of coming in. It leaves. This cycle produces acetyl-CoA. And the input is fatty acids. So fatty acids, I'm gonna jump over to the document camera for a second. Just as a reminder of what fatty acids looked like, it was like this, and just a long thing of carbon, and so I'm going to draw that a tiny bit better. And sometimes they might have double bonds and stuff in them. That just throws a little wrench in the plan. But what the idea is there, and basically what this process does, what this cycle here does, is it chops them up 2 carbons at a time. So it'll kind of like chop off 2 carbons and stick on a CoA. Stick on a CoA, and out comes acetyl-CoA. Then they'll chop the next 2 carbons, stick on a CoA, and out comes acetyl-CoA. And the same thing, right? Chop it there, CoA, out comes acetyl-CoA, until it's done. All right, until it chops up the whole thing, chops that, and then that will also get processed into acetyl-CoA as well. So this creates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 acetyl-CoAs. And then the acetyl-CoA is going to go into the Krebs cycle. Right, so that acetyl-CoA ends up in the Krebs cycle. Does Krebs, and the normal Krebs cycle stuff happens. 2 CO2 comes out, 3 NADH comes out, 1 FADH comes out, and 1 GTP, which creates 1 ATP, comes out. For each of these acetyl-CoAs, that's 9 ATP when it goes through electron transport chain. That's 2 ATP when it goes through electron transport chain. So each acetyl-CoA here is 9 plus 2 plus 1 is 12 ATP, just making that acetyl-CoA. But that's not all that this cycle does. If we jump back to this view, this view, you can see that not only does it create the acetyl-CoA that's going to go and make 12 ATP, it also generates an FADH2, and generates an NADH. So each of these steps also creates FADH2 and NADH. So that's worth 2 ATP, and that's worth 3 ATP. So every 2 carbons in the fats that we're processing, every 2 carbons there are going to be worth, that's 5 ATP. So at a maximum, 5 plus 12 is 17 ATP for every 2 carbons. So 17 ATP for every 2 carbons, which is huge, right? And that's why fats are our main energy storage, because like I said, 17 ATP for 2 carbons. If we kind of think about that, 17 ATP per 2 carbons, if you multiply it by 3, that's 51 ATP per 6 carbon. Per 6 carbons, which is more than glucose. Quite a lot more than glucose. And that's why your body likes to store energy as fat. It's a higher energy density molecule. Jumping back to this, but this is only done if you don't have enough glycogen and don't have enough of carbs in your body. That's why a lot of people say that reducing the amount of carbs that you eat is a good way to burn fat, because your body has no choice but to burn fat at that point to support how much work you're doing. Acetyl-CoA is a ketone. If we look at it, its structure, it's a ketone, and it's related to other molecules. They're called ketone bodies, and that's what ketosis is. Ketosis. You can detect the acetyl-CoA in the blood because the liver is making it, and that means that it's processing fats. So that's how you get your body into keto. One important note here is that I'm going to actually write this here. Is that your brain still needs glucose. Right? Your brain is so energetically intensive that it needs to use a glucose supply in order to make energy. So if you're really, really, really low on carbs, your body actually has ways to make glucose and feed the brain. But that can lead to certain types of metabolic damage. So you do need a certain amount of carbs. It's just a lot less than what most people eat during the day. So that's ketosis. Proteins. So proteins, remember that every protein is, we'll jump over the document camera. Every protein has this. Every protein has this this kind of thing going on, right? R group, and then OH, and so it actually kind of has most of an acetyl group already. If you just stick a CoA on here, right? If you chop off the R group and you chop off the NH2 and you stick in a CoA, that's acetyl-CoA. Well, with the sulfur, acetyl-CoA, sulfur-CoA, and so proteins, a lot of them will actually get processed into acetyl-CoA. But one big problem here, and that's the keep in mind, right? The keep in mind here is nitrogen, the amino part of the amino acid that has to get processed. So that's what you'll see here. I'll jump back over here. This chart is really cool. It tells you which amino acids in the protein go to what part of the cell cycle. So these 6 turn into pyruvate, these ones. Alanine is probably the one that's the most obvious why it would turn into pyruvate, because on alanine, this R group is just a carbon. So it's a 3-carbon molecule already, so it can turn into that 3-carbon pyruvate. Other ones like tryptophan, tyrosine, phenylalanine, threonine, isoleucine, and lysine, and leucine, these ones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them, turn into acetyl-CoA, like I was talking about earlier. So most of your proteins, most of the amino acids in your proteins, 13 out of the 20, will turn into acetyl-CoA. But other ones will actually join at different parts in the cycle. So like these ones become oxaloacetate. These ones become glutamate, and then the glutamate joins as ketoglutarate. These ones join as acetyl-CoA, these ones join as fumarate. You don't have to memorize this. Just know that most of them join as either pyruvate or acetyl-CoA. But the heavy processing has to be done on the proteins because of the nitrogen. This nitrogen here on the protein, every protein has nitrogen on it. So so this is a little diagram of that where it releases NH3 when the liver is using up the proteins. The NH3 gets turned into this molecule called urea, which is just a nitrogen-heavy molecule. And urea ends up in the urine. It's called urea because it was discovered in the urine, and out it goes. It gets peed out through the kidney. So that's what's happening there. The nitrogen, the ammonia is toxic to the body, so it gets turned into this less toxic version of a nitrogen compound called urea, and out it goes. And we've talked about the different amino acids. Just as a quick aside, urea images. This is urea. So you see that it's carrying two of those NH2 groups, and this ketone on it kind of helps it dissolve in the water and makes it a bit less toxic on the way out. Yeah, we'll talk more about urea when we talk about kidney function in the talk about kidney function in the homeostasis unit that's coming up. And here you can see an overview of these processes. So you see that like sugars go through glycolysis, fats become acetyl-CoA through beta oxidation and make lots and lots of energy. That's why they're our main energy source. Or that's why our main energy storage, I should say. Right? Lots and lots of energy per 2 carbons. Proteins join the Krebs cycle at various places, mostly pyruvate and acetyl-CoA, but they make this NH3 that has to get processed. One thing to note, nucleic acids can also be digested. So DNA, you're eating stuff and it's got DNA in it. Your body, as a last resort, can actually start eating nucleic acids, and it also has nitrogen in it, all that nitrogen in the bases, and that also has to get cleared as NH3. So all your biomolecules can be used as energy in one way or another. Polysaccharides first, carbs first, then fats, then proteins, because we'd rather use proteins to build enzymes and do cell stuff instead of using it for energy. But if you've only got proteins in there, that's what you're going to burn. And those take more energy to process than either one of these. That's it. So just a quick review. We've talked about BMR and TDEE and the difference between them. We've talked about fast and slow metabolisms and some of the different variables between humans that make metabolisms fast and slow. And we've talked about how fats and proteins get metabolized. Beta oxidation for fats, and ripping off that nitrogen for proteins and having to create urea to process it into urea to pee it out. That's it. Keep an eye out for the quiz, and I'll see you in the live class. So long.